Hey, Coach, it's Dan, and welcome to another speaker edition of the National Collegiate Recruiting Conference of 2020. And we are so excited about this next talk that we're going to give you. And I'm going to introduce to you Kevin E. West. He is a Hollywood actor. He has been around for a long, long time. He's been on a lot of shows that you have watched. He's made appearances on Criminal Minds, Bones, CSI Miami, Lost, 24, Desperate Housewives, and many, many more. So he is a veteran Hollywood actor. And the reason that he's here, and I'm so appreciative of his time and what he's going to lend to this conversation that all of you as coaches need to know, is he's an expert communicator. He's also written several books, including The Seven Deadly Sins, The Actor Overcomes. But he's here to talk about communication because at the core, that's what an actor does, communicates a role, communicates a message in a very short compacted way, much like you have to do, Coach. And I'm not suggesting in this that you all become actors and don't, suspend being genuine, but it is about conveying and communicating the right things in a very short amount of time to the prospects that you want. And that's what we're going to lean on Kevin for in his expertise. So, Kevin, welcome. I appreciate you being a part of the conference this year. Wish it could have been in person, but we're so thrilled to have you here, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely, Dan. I very much appreciate it. Yes, I would like to have been there as well, but I thank you for having me nonetheless, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and we know you're busy, and so taking time out of your acting schedule and travel schedule is appreciative. Just so
Both of
coaches,
which have been destroyed.
yeah, probably it's you have more free time than usual, but
Yes.
we're still very appreciative. And you were just to sort of throw in the sports aspect, you were a walk-on golfer. So tell us a little bit about that, just so the coaches can know that.
I was, and I want to be careful as I say this, Dan, because part of what I will say about my background actually is related to communication. So I'm not going down a violin road, but I make a joke that I was good enough to know how good I wasn't. And part of that is that unfortunately my particular household lifestyle, and this is something recruiters deal with, we deal with all kinds of lifestyles, parental support or lack thereof. And I happen to grow up in a single parent home, and my mother worked all the time, and she actually demanded that I work for her. So I basically made I started in golf late, didn't even pick up a club until I was 14. I made the high school team in jeans and street shoes with borrowed clubs. And as I got closer to being a senior, I was the number one golfer in my high school, but I just didn't get much time to practice. So it became very difficult to compete with the country club boys in the sense that I just, you got to put time in if you're going to be. And I did manage to walk on at the University of Kentucky. At that time, Tennessee and Georgia were both in the top 10. So the SEC was pretty tough back then. And so I walked on there, and then I also wound up walking on at Middle Tennessee State, which was a D2 school at the
Mm,
time that I was in college. But I was an all-star baseball player when I was a kid, and when I moved out to LA, Southern California, great baseball leagues out here, and I got involved in mid senior baseball, which is technically 30, but they let two players on at 28. And I played in 7 men's World Series in the Papago Park in Arizona, second base, mostly third base. But so I played switch hitter, played all that as well. So I'm a sports freak for
yeah,
sure.
awesome, awesome. Well, you'll fit right in here. And I guess I'm just wondering too, just as all that was going on, obviously you developed the acting bug and got good at it. So can you give people a sense of how you got into that, how you broke into Hollywood, and also how you've maintained
Uh,
that kind of longevity?
well, I won't go down a rabbit hole on you, Dan, because it would be a rabbit hole. But there's a lot of misperceptions about acting in Hollywood just in general. But I won't do the whole story. But basically, through a friend, I wound up. My mother had a restaurant in Nashville, which is where I grew up in rural Nashville. She was a country singer, and one of her clients had a wife that ran a modeling school. I'm not a model, but it led me to get interested in it because I was a class clown. I had a personality. I got paddled a lot. We got paddled back then in the 70s. I was fairly disruptive. I was a good student, but I was disruptive. And that's sort of what led to an event in New York, which I won doing my own commercial that I wrote and created. And it eventually led me to putting down golf when I couldn't get to where I wanted to get to based on lifestyle. And became an actor. Went to Atlanta for 2 years, and then I moved to LA.
Yeah. Wow. And you've obviously had a great career, and I'm sure some of the advice you're going to give, we're going to be able to understand how that's translated into that great career. But for coaches, and that's our focus today, and that's your
Mhm.
audience today. Um, you want to talk about communication. I think this is one of the big things that coaches don't focus enough on as they're getting good at their craft, and it is a craft. Recruiting is a learned art, and so when they aren't communicating well, the prospects pick up on that, and it starts to affect the way that they, as the prospect, look at that coach and maybe even the school, because the coach really is sort of the face of everything about the school. When they are good at it, and there's a lot of people that are, and there's several coaches at Kentucky that are very good recruiters and in different sports, and that drives their success. So when it comes to communication, I want to dive right into this topic. You've sort of broken it out into a couple of different areas. Um, just give me your theory, your overall big picture view on communication and how it lends to the way that we understand things, and as an actor, how you try to convey things as we get into this topic.
I will be really honest with you, Dan, and also your audience. To me, there is no difference. You said
Mm,
something in the very beginning of this that is absolutely the intro to everything that I talk about. You said to the coaches, we're not trying to make you be actors, we want you to be genuine. Now, I understand why an audience member would say that. And yet, the only way that you're going to be a good actor is that you know how to be genuine with somebody else's words. Because if
mm,
you aren't 100% genuine, if you do not believe, when people say get into character, the truth of the matter is that means simply that I am committed to the genuine sincerity of what those words mean to that person, whoever said them. So it doesn't matter whether you're an actor or whether you're sitting in the living room talking to a recruit. If you lose sight in your pitch, for lack of a better phrase, or your habits, as it were, and you lose any form of being genuine or sincerity, no, not only would you be a poor actor, you probably wouldn't get hired, but you also may lose the recruit. So that
right.
word genuine and the word sincere are 100% a part of anything that I would talk about, because the goal is obviously to sign them. But as my acting coach used to always say, and I'm sure many of your coaches know this mantra because it's equals for sports, concern yourself with the effort and the result will take care of itself.
Right.
You can't try to hit a home run. You can't try to hit the ball 2 feet from the hole. You just, as a golfer, you have to just do the effort of the mechanics of your sport,
Right.
and the result will take care of itself. Same thing with communication.
And I'm not trying to, I don't want to get too far away from the core of what you want to talk
Mhm.
about today, but as we're talking about this, I want to go back to something I just sort of mentioned in passing, that I think the challenge for a coach, and where it relates, I view it anyway, is relating to an actor, is that you play out a scene.
Mhm.
uh, that scene, even though people don't realize it, that scene is a very, very short amount of time. I mean, you're talking, maybe that scene could be a minute and a half if it's a television show. It could be less, or I mean,
Yes.
so what you're trying to do is convey that aspect, that part of the story, in a very short amount of time. You have to do that through all of these different, emotions, the facial expressions, the words, certainly, and coaches have to do that as well, because there are so many things that a recruit is going to listen to and pick up on or see that is missing, and they're going to compare you to other coaches that are communicating with them. So I think the challenge is the same: is how do I convey in a very short amount of time what we're all about and how much I care about them and the emotion behind maybe them deciding to come with us. So as you talk, that's sort of the perspective that I'm running it
Sure.
through, is where coaches and actors are very much alike.
Absolutely, and I would say 3 things to that. My basic thing, Dan, with regards to communication, as you would find in me, is, uh, my trademark, as it were, is AEI, which is audience, environment, and intent. And that comes, we use different words, but that comes straight from learning to be an actor. And it is the organic journey of communication. Because I would say to every one of your coaches, and some of them sort of know this, but you're a storyteller. We all are
Mhm.
storytellers. When you communicate, it doesn't matter whether it's 5 words or whether it's a Shakespearean sonnet. We're still telling a story because you're trying to get across something. You have, as we say in acting, we always say, what's your objective, right? We call it in
Right.
life a goal, but it's the same thing. Your objective has to come sincerely, as I call one of my speaking programs, Inception. You probably saw the movie. Maybe some of your coaches saw the movie Inception, planting an idea inside someone's mind while they're sleeping. But all of our ideas that we communicate come from the inside of us, which mean they're subjective to your feelings, they're subjective to your childhood, they're subjective to your life and your experiences. And that, ironically, Dan, to me, is what happens with communication. George Bernard Shaw had the greatest quote ever about communication. I use it, I love it, it's awesome. It says, the problem with communication is the illusion that it's actually taken place. Now,
Hmm.
that's not to put anybody down, and he didn't say lie. I'm not talking about someone who's intentfully, there's that word again,
Right.
intentfully lying or intentfully deceiving. It's what I say all the time, that I think people most of the time say what they mean. They just don't mean what they say.
Right.
And that's
And so,
specificity.
and to be clear, what you're talking about is a learned art. Nobody is. You hear the term, "Well, he was a natural born salesperson," or that. For, acting is a learned art, and so for
Yes,
a
sir.
coach watching this that says, "Well, I'm an introvert, or I'm a young coach, I can't. How could I ever, talk the way that Kevin and is instructing me as we go through this?" This is a learned art. Nobody is born with it, and so I think what's going to be interesting as you get deeper into this is the fact that this is something that a coach can pick up on and master.
Anybody can master this, and I'm not kidding,
Okay,
Dan.
that's awesome.
Anybody can master this. I've said for years, animation is animation or voiceover is voiceover. But if you're talking about a human being being an on camera, which is what we call it, scripted actor, you're a human being playing a human being. Anybody could do that if you really wanted to actually. Now, I also do an analogy because I'm filled with analogies and metaphors, Dan. Sorry, I'm just filled with
Yeah,
them.
all
But
the years of acting, that's not surprising. I'm sure
yeah, and I was a stand-up
metaphors and
comic,
stories.
so there you go.
Okay, there you go.
So the analogy is school. This is ironic because we're talking about going to school. And I used to say to people, I used to say to actors constantly, I'm like, are you saying that you just woke up and you were naturally good at every subject? And somebody would always go, no, I hated blah, or I hated blah. And it's like, yeah, did they let you out of school with 3 A's and 3 F's? No. So you had to work harder at the things that you didn't either enjoy or that didn't naturally come to you. This is the same thing. If you want to get good at this, you can, because as the old phrase goes, knowledge is power. But you know what, Dan? Victory loves preparation.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we're all, there's a lot of forms of winning, but I mean, if you want to spend the time, because most of this starts with looking in the mirror. Most of what I talk to people about, and most of what we're going to get into, is how your own communication evolves and is the inception out of you, because that's what the recruit is going to pick up on, and that's what they're going to get the sense from. And as long as you really start to learn you, you will never have to worry about having a game plan and being sincere. And those are the two things you have to do in a short span to convince somebody of anything, in my opinion.
Yeah. So this philosophy of communication that you're talking about, the AEI,
Mhm.
it starts with audience.
It
So
does.
let's dive into that and talk about, for a coach, that audience is going to be a recruit, a family, the people that surround them that help make that decision. Acting, it's a little bit different, but it's still understanding your audience. And can you just maybe talk a little bit about that aspect of what a coach needs to understand as they get to be better
Well,
communicators?
absolutely. And for an actor, your audience is inside the paper. It's who the character's audience is in that scene. So we naturally just say the parents, but it's not just the parents. Are you alone with either one of them at any moment? That changes the dynamic of the conversation. Are you alone with the recruit? That changes the dynamic. Are there siblings present as well? Are you talking with the recruit and the siblings only? All of those changes in audience. Are you talking to, maybe, and again, this happens a lot, we know this, there are some kids who are raised by their grandparents. There's some kids who don't have any parents. Maybe you're actually having a meeting with them and it's their mentor from school or somebody. I mean, I came from the rural South. I grew up, yes, I was born a white male, but I grew up with no money, no father. I mean, everybody has a different dynamic. Every single time you change who you're sitting with, you have literally changed. We don't realize it, but we've changed the audience of how things are given out and how things are received. So the more your coaches can, just starting with, become cognizant and then really cognitive in planning what they're going to say, on finding out who's going to be in the room, which is what actors say, who's in the room.
Yeah.
So who's in the room, because it changes when, depending on who it is.
So give us an example on the acting side, because you could play the same character. And if that's a one-on-one scene with somebody else, that's going to be much different than if you have it's an ensemble scene your role, maybe the way you communicate is different. The way that role changes, it is going to depend on that. You brought up something great that, for you, if I'm a coach and I'm walking into a single parent household in rural Alabama and versus two parent household in the suburbs in Connecticut, those are two different audiences, two different decision making probably methodologies that they're going to decide who, which place is going to be best for them. I guess just maybe talk a little bit about that, or as an actor, how you would flip between those two scenes, or those two audiences in what you do in your craft.
I flip between all of those by the questions that you ask. Um,
Okay.
I know that we have a short period of time, Dan, and what we get caught up in is, again, we're natural. That's why I go back to the very first thing I said. What's your goal? I want to sign them. Of course, it's your goal. What's an actor's goal? Well, I want to get the job.
Right.
Yeah, but if you go in to get the job, I mean, and I'm going to be very careful about how I say this, but I've made
Yeah.
an analogy to acting and even this my whole life to dating. And I'll just do it as simply as this: the old joke of you've been a dude your whole life, whatever, going out with the boys and the thing, and all of a sudden you get married and you go out with your boys with the wedding ring on. And somehow throughout that evening, day, wherever it is, you seem to be getting more attention than you would normally get. You want to know why? Because you've naturally removed your need or desperation from what you want from the environment you're around.
Hmm.
And so that's the same thing that happens to us when we're condensed into a short period of time. So we're busy trying to get out our pitch. We don't want to call
Right.
it a pitch. It's genuine and sincere, but I'm just saying we spend more time talking, and it's ironic in that we're talking this way, but we need to spend more time asking questions.
Right.
And because we want to get a true sense of what this person is about in a short period of time, you have to be disarming without being disingenuous. And you have to be kind of cool and hip, depending on our age. I mean, you and I are real similar in age. We're going to go talk to somebody who's 17 or 18. I mean, there's that with regards to Connecticut and Alabama. And then there's also who's your audience. There's also where you are. Maybe you're at a food place. Maybe you're eating. Maybe it's a nearby campus and you're trying to recruit somebody from Roll Tide to Auburn. I don't know, but we don't ask a lot of questions. So I'm a big advocate of asking somebody something like, listen, put your degree and your sport aside. And if you put those two things aside, what would you want to be?
Right.
Get
You
get
mentioned, oh,
them to get them to talk. Get
right.
them to
Right.
talk.
You mentioned something a second ago. The phrase you use is removing the need. When you remove the need, remove that
Oh,
desperation.
yes.
And I think that is so powerful because so many coaches are desperate. They need that recruit. They need to sign them. They
Sure.
need to they need to build the program. And it's interesting that when you remove that pressure, or at least when you convey through your communication that what you want that prospect, but you're still going to have a team next year if they don't want to come. uh, just what would your advice be to a coach that says, yeah, I want to communicate that more, and I need to back off a little bit and maybe don't come on so strong, but it's also there's a time aspect, and I don't
Sure.
want to go, I don't want to be so hands off that they lose interest
Sure.
somewhere else. um your general, I'm gonna put you on the spot because just for coaches watching this,
Sure.
Kevin and I haven't gone over these questions before, so he's answering on the fly. um what would you tell that coach to say, hey coach, if you're feeling desperate, here's what not to do, and here, just from a technique standpoint, here's maybe some things that would convey from an actor standpoint, we're asking coaches to act a little bit here, that's going to convey that there's a confidence that you're interested, but you're confident, and you're not desperate. How would you how would
I
you
think, again,
advise
I
that?
think you have to go to what touches somebody. And what touches somebody is commonality, familiarity. That's what allies somebody with somebody. That's why, again, depending on someone's age, when I said be cool and hip without being hokey, I'm not telling you you have to know what Marco Polo is as a communication tool, or you have to watch TikTok, but you have to at least be aware of what Twitch is. You don't have to know it, but if you're willing to say, "Hey, listen, do you happen to be someone who enjoys Twitch? And if so, what is?" You just want someone to feel like, in the genuine sincerity, that they genuinely care about something besides your athletic skill. You have your facilities, you have your campus, you know them backwards and forwards. But wait a second. If you're trying to recruit somebody who's going maybe from a geographical thing, or even worse, sometimes I think somebody you're trying to recruit from inside of Texas to go to a Texas school, but maybe one that is not necessarily what they would expect to go to. You're trying to get to go somebody from Lubbock, from Austin. That's going to be a tough call. You may have a lot of commonalities already that exist based on state, culture, barbecue. Find something different.
Right.
One little wrinkle about your campus, something about them. We also, coaches, we don't, Dan, this is something I told actors, we don't pay attention to our surroundings. When you walk in the house, be cordial and all that sort of stuff, but see what you see on the walls. What are the pictures of? Do they travel? Do you see any tchotchkes or anything that give you insight? And this is why I said knowledge is power, but victory loves preparation. And the
Right.
more you start to work in these little things, that you're a chamber of commerce in a way, not for your school and your campus, but what's around the campus. Is the kid
Right.
naturally homesick? Are you not? You have to ask them. 17, 18-year-olds may not even know what the answer is, but they've probably also never been asked it. And
Yeah.
when you ask somebody a question they're not expecting, you know what you get to see? You get to see their true self. Because a great actor is somebody who has the ability to be instantly vulnerable. We just have to do it with somebody else's words in front of a whole bunch of people standing around a camera you guys can't see. I mean, there's
Right.
literally 40 people that are 17 feet away and everything. Shh, be quiet, go.
Yeah.
That's what makes it hard. But our job is to make it look easy. A recruiter's job is to make that 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, seem like it was a walk in the park, heart knife through butter. We just have to think more about what the person's about.
Right.
Who do they go to when they're in trouble more, mom or dad? When they have more of a life mantra question, who do they go to more, mom or dad? Because if you ask that question in front of both parents, the kid's likely to say he's going to give the concerned answer of like, well, I love them both, so I mean, who knows? But
Right.
I just don't think we ask enough questions that draw out the vulnerability of your recruit to have a brief sense of true connection with you, the recruiter, because that's what it is. All of life, who we want to hang out with. Yes, we enjoy them, but it's two words. It's genuine connection. And a good storyteller makes you want to listen to their story.
Yeah. You said something I think so powerful. You talked about sort of the observation. You walk into a room, you walk onto a campus, you walk into a prospect's home to be able to sort of steal with your eyes, to gather information
Yes.
without even. So now it's another really aspect of asking questions. And I had a decade of experience in Fortune 100 sales at a very high level. And one of the things that they teach you is when you walk in to meet with somebody, doing exactly what you're talking about, Kevin, which is observe the room. So is it messy, disorganized? Well, that's going to probably tell you some insights about how they're going to make their decision, or if you're going to have to lead them through a decision because they aren't organized enough to make it as well. And like to your point, is dad doing most of the talking? Is it the mom that's doing most of the talking? You get to pick up who is the decision maker. I would imagine that works the same way in Hollywood when you're going in for an acting job and you're walking into a casting call and you're going to read for a part, observing who's there, maybe past experience of what they like, and that's part of just the practicality of your world. Is how we get the job depends on who we're communicating with and how we do
Yeah,
that.
it's not insincere. It's a form of genuine assimilation, genuine
Yeah. Yeah.
genuine awareness. I mean, I'm really hard. I mean, I built a company called the Actors Network, Dan, that was a business information organization for actors, which is kind of like oil and vinegar. Actors like the show part, they don't like the business part. That's why I wrote my
Right.
book.
Right.
And I used to talk to them all the time about observation and awareness. I'm like, I would say to them, I said, you are aware that you're in a physical observation business, right? I mean, we do physical behavior. That's what we do. For a recruiter, it's like, I'm not sure I would want to try to always see a kid's room. I would just want, hey man, show me your room. I want to
Right.
see what's on I don't care how messy it is. I want to see what's on the wall. I
Right.
want to ask somebody, are you a natural loner or are you a social person? These are things I would want to know about the way the inception of their life rolls outside of their parents. I would love to try and see them around their boyfriend or girlfriend if they have one, or around their bestie if he comes by. Like, I know all of those scenarios, but I want to put them out to you because that all falls under the AEI, but it's the one we haven't talked about, which is the environment.
Right.
Where are you? I used to
Right.
say to actors all the time, I could give you, Dan, you would do it because you have a personality, you're a sales guy. I could hand you 3 pages of material. And I'd say to you, okay, Dan, read this scene with me like we're sitting at a restaurant. And all I would have to do to get you to change that conversation, I could whisper in your ear, and all of a sudden your coaches and your recruiters, wouldn't know what happened, but they'd see you do an entirely different scene because what I whispered in your ears, I said, now this conversation is taking place in an elevator.
Hmm.
Environment intrinsically changes the way we communicate. It changes the words that we say. It changes the intonation that we have. It's like putting on clothes, right? Dressing up to go out. Clothes make you feel different.
Right.
So these are things that we don't, this is no one's fault, by the way. I don't want anybody watching to think, oh, I should have known. No, especially men in this country are not taught anything. And I was a third baseman and I grew
Yeah.
up in rural Tennessee, like eating dirt and dog food. I'm serious. I've tried both those things. Probably shouldn't disclose that, but I have, because that's what you do in the 70s in
Sure.
Tennessee,
Yeah.
along with fishing. So we don't intrinsically have a reason technically to learn this about ourselves, but these are the things that would cause in very small ways. And what you said earlier is when you master this, you literally have a toolbox nobody else has. And you know how and when to pull it out on a moment's notice because of what you
Yeah.
see, what you hear, who you're with. Somebody came in the room, somebody left. Your audience and environment is always changing. What's never changing in this scenario is your intent. Your
Hmm.
intent is always to convince them to come with you. But it's not what you do, it's how you do it. It's not what you say, it's how you say it when it's subjectivity.
Right. Okay, so let's move to that environment part of the AEI equation that you're talking about, Kevin.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, if the prospect and the family walk into my office as a coach on campus, man, that's my home field. I'm at my desk, maybe I'm in my familiar surroundings, and I'm really in the power position, and they're sort of
Mhm.
following my lead.
Mhm.
It flips when I'm in their house or I'm on the phone with them or doing a Zoom call with them. So in general, how you talked a little bit about environment and how it should change, and I'm just wondering, w- understanding sort of what who your audience is, maybe starting to build out and connect your AEIs. If I know who my audience is, and I'm in their house, and it's a single mom, okay, I understand the audience, and now the environment, because I'm in their place, I'm in their home. I have to change a little bit. I probably can't act the same way that I would on campus. If I do that in their house, it could come off as a little bit odd. Like we just wouldn't expect somebody to maybe feel as comfortable as that in our own house. So maybe, can you just talk a little bit about the environment part and maybe the mistakes to watch out for if you're an actor, actors that don't take that into account? How does that hurt them, and what does that scene come off as? Because I think it's a fascinating aspect of what you're talking about.
I, you know, I, it, the whole place it comes from, Dan, is because of acting. And it's what I just said to you, where you are.
Mm.
So we do have different mechanics now, and when it comes to communication, we have basically a handful of mechanics. You're either calling somebody or you're texting them, or it's an in-person conversation, or it's an email, rarely snail mail, I understand, or there's Marco Polo, which you probably wouldn't use in this environment. But if I were going to someone's place, I would probably, when speaking with the parent, whoever I mostly spoke to, doesn't matter who it is or if it's just one, I would probably ask them. One of the questions I would ask is, where does Bill or Lisa or Mary or Jim, genuinely like to hang out in the house? That's where I would want the conversation to be.
Hmm.
I don't want it to be that just because I'm coming over, like in The Blind Side, which is fine. We
Right.
all saw the movie, that we have to sit in the living room or that we have to sit. I mean, maybe there's an island in the kitchen and there's kind of a countertop and he's always sitting on the stool and mom's in the kitchen. That's where he likes to sit. Cool. I'll sit in the stool next to you. Where does your kid
Hmm.
like to hang? Maybe there's something in the backyard. Maybe there's an Adirondack chair under a chair. I don't care. I want to ask the parent, where does your kid like to sit and chat with people?
Right.
Because I think sometimes in your own home, you can be extraordinarily uncomfortable when you live there. I mean, a
Right.
lot of it, I mean, maybe you hang out a lot in your living room, but how many houses have we been in, especially like really big houses, where the living room looks kind of like a museum? Like
Right.
nobody ever goes there. There's an entertainment room, like everybody's in the kitchen, the backyard, the thing or something. So
Right.
first thing, I'm never even going to show up to the environment without knowing, where does this person I'm trying to talk to and have be comfortable in a short period of time, where do they like to hang out?
Right.
I'm going to always consider them.
Right. Yeah. In our own houses, you were saying that. I'm thinking, yeah, if we were to go and do that kind of a talk in our formal dining room, which we use 3 times a year, maybe. That would be odd for one of my kids to go sit and have a conversation there because it never happens.
Right, and it makes it you
Uh,
don't see it, but it makes them like, this is going
right,
on the inside. You don't see it because they're trying to
right,
be chill and cool and they're 17 and what, but
right,
this is what happens on the inside. My acting
right.
coach's favorite thing to say used to be, "Relax your shoulders." Literally the first thing, relax your shoulders. You can
Right,
say exhale, but it doesn't mean you're gonna relax your shoulders. Still be like this.
right,
And the dining room would be something your own kids would be like, not really
right,
feeling it, dad. You know,
right.
yeah, find out from the parents or whoever's going to set the meeting up where they like to hang out in the house.
Well, and is it fair to say that, and just exploring this topic a little bit more, is it fair to say that when you put a family, when you put a prospect, parent, whoever that you're talking to in that environment that's not comfortable for them, it's going to affect their ability to take in what you're saying and also just give you the information that you need. Going back to that, asking them questions, I'm going to
Mhm.
probably answer questions differently in my dining room as opposed to in the living room with my, with the footstool, my feet kicked up. I mean, as I'm thinking about it, it really does affect like how you're going to, as a coach, receive information back.
100%. And you and I are old enough. I don't know how much of your audience will be, but remember the game Clue when we were kids?
Hmm.
Mr. Green in the dining room with a candlestick. That basically is AEI.
Mm,
It's that makes up what I'm discussing. And so I have a thing that I invented. Yeah, I invented it.
sure,
It's called the selfie. Now everybody watching
I've heard
going,
of
wait
it.
a minute. Pat, he goes, wait a minute, Kevin, you didn't invent the selfie. No, you're right. I didn't invent the selfie taking a picture of myself. I spell mine differently, Dan.
Right.
SEL F period E period E period. The selfie, because the three main killers of good communication is that we tend to speak from inside of ourselves: fear, ego, and envy. One of
Hmm.
those three is driving our conversation both as a distributor of communication and oftentimes as a filter recipient of communication. And so when you put somebody in an uncomfortable position, there's a very good likelihood, because again, sometimes some of you guys may be recruiting somebody and man, maybe they're an A minus recruit for you. You're kind of, I'm not saying you're coming in shrugging your shoulders, but you're not salivating per se. And you put a kid who suddenly feels in a position where they're speaking from sort of being fearful, and that's what actors do all the time. They
Right.
walk into an audition afraid they won't get the job. I got bad news for you. You just took about 25% away from what you possibly could do in that room.
Right.
So and fear and ego and envy makes us do a couple of things. It tends to make us be silent when we shouldn't be, and it also tends to make us omit things when we do talk. And silence and omission are not the same thing.
Right.
This is what happens to us. Or if you get too much in an egotistical place, we wind up saying things that we probably shouldn't have. And that goes for the coaches as well. The selfie speaks to both parties. That's why I'm such a big advocate about what the environment does to you.
Right. So it's interesting you're getting on this point. I want to dive, ask one more question at least on it. In when it comes to environment, we often advise coaches that when they're hosting an on-campus recruiting event, when they're having a
Mhm.
family there, that they really need to almost do. And I've related it to Starbucks. When you walk into Starbucks, they want you to have an experience there, and so there's the lighting is a certain way, the the all the dark color, the wood, the music, it's there to create a feeling as you're there picking up your overpriced coffee that you are, it's just enjoyable. It sort of makes you do relax a little bit maybe, and they do call you by your name, and there's the sounds, and I can hang out and just camp out there all day. They got the free Wi-Fi, and they're there about creating an experience, and they're very specific about from the moment you step in what that experience should be like each step of the way.
Mhm.
And what we find is that coaches, when it comes to their environment, don't take that much time with it. It's, come on into my office and we'll talk. Well, in the corner is a bunch of boxes from the camp over the summer that they have extra t-shirts of, and there's equipment, and maybe it smells funny or it's too small and they have to pull off a chair and pull the stuff out of the chair to so that the parents can sit down. And they're not paying attention to that environment in the same way that, for instance, a Starbucks would in the environment that they want to create. So I guess what I'm asking is for you to give permission, because you're in a world where certain scenes are set up to convey a feeling or convey a scene. The lighting is done in a certain way to convey a mood or what you want to silently communicate to the prospect. is it okay for a coach to create a little bit of a set or that environment that they want to, have that conversation within? If it's a 30-minute conversation, I have to make this the best 30-minute conversation ever. What I hear you saying is that environment counts. And is it okay for a coach to create a little bit of not a false environment, but the best possible environment for that one setting as possible?
Yeah, like I said, I actually don't think it's okay, Dan. I think it's mandatory.
Hmm.
And this is where you have to be careful about not being disingenuous. But again, I said knowledge is power, victory loves preparation. You have to be prepared for something. Now, I'm going to kind of go a long way around this answer because I
Yeah.
have a couple
Yeah.
things that I want to say about this.
Please do. Yeah.
It's an outstanding question. Not only do I think it's mandatory, but again, you have to prepare for your guests. You're talking in the restaurant business about the presentation on the plate. Now, sometimes it can be very minimal, and sometimes it's more than that. Either way, it's got to work for what you're ordering, right? And your presentation matters. And I'm personally someone who believes that, and this is something I say to actors all the time. So I'm not just saying this to coaches. This in general is the case that we didn't grow up with. You have a recruit. You can learn so much about that recruit today without ever meeting them that you couldn't have 20 years ago. And it's called social media.
Hmm.
And going back to that question, I would say to an athlete, if it wasn't your sport or your degree, what would you want to be? Well, you can actually probably find out most of the time, of what someone kind of is about. And my presentation for that in my backyard, my home court, would be what exists in the close geography around my campus and or what exists on my campus that isn't necessarily related to the sport that I could just happen to expose them to or make them aware of that exists here that's in line with something you already know is an interest or a thing of theirs. Because
Mm.
hobbies, favorite movies, favorite music, favorite TV shows, as a coach, you want to have a sense of what this person is going to be doing when they're not in your charge. And
Right.
one of the ways to actually garner somebody wanting to hang out with you is that you have something on that campus, something in your office that tells them, I can talk to this person about something this person understands. There's something in this place for me that isn't just school and sports or girls and boys.
Right.
And so I think the presentation of what you give is that's what, again, I'd probably want to spend 15 minutes in the office and I'd probably want to spend 15 minutes walking. But that's
Right.
Kevin. That's Kevin saying that. Some people are going to be more like based on your personality, because that's the big thing, Dan, is this my long way around this. I apologize. It's a 5-minute
You're
answer.
you're you're good.
Um, don't ever forget that there's the Grand Canyon in human beings and communication. And on one side is your personality, on the other side is your character. And they
Mm.
are two distinctly different things. Your personality is your image and how we market kind of the natural unknown part of ourselves. It's how you occur to people, whereas your integrity is character. It's more the preparation, it's more your work ethic. And I'm one of those people who, yeah, I talk a lot and I'm a smart ass and I do all those things, but the core character of me is the guy who, grew up with nothing, who's worked
Right.
and busted his butt, came to Hollywood not knowing a soul. When nepotism helps, it helps a lot in Hollywood, because Hollywood isn't a sport. You can have all the family in the world, but if you can't hit a golf ball, you can't play professional golf. Doesn't matter who you know. Just ask Jack's son. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying in the Midwest, I grew up with Nicholas. And so, it doesn't matter who your dad is. But in Hollywood, I didn't have anybody. I had to bust my butt. So I just am a big advocate, yes, Dan, of preparation for allowing somebody to do this as
Hmm.
easily as possible. Back in the movie Rocky, I know you know it, early
Hmm.
in the movie, when he finally asks Adrian out, he takes her to a skating rink. Well, he doesn't skate. So he's kind of going around the rink on his feet and she's skating. And he says, I don't know, you got gaps, I got gaps. Together we fill gaps. That's what you're doing as a recruiter, because the sport is one thing. But what's the rest of their life going to be like? And it can't just be we got cool bar. To me, it can't just be we have cool
Right.
barbecue and it's a really pretty campus. Find something and
Right.
prepare your office or prepare your conversation that lends itself to that without being disingenuous.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to throw another environmental question at you as we talk about this, because you mentioned that you were a stand-up comic. Now, you're a stand-up comic. That environment is going to be different. And I actually think that's more of the environment that a coach is in versus a movie set where everything's very controlled, and they take 30 minutes to do the lighting and then they say action. You can do it 4 or 5 times. I think it's more like stand-up comedy where you have to perform, it's live, and if you make a mistake, you live with it. There's no going back. So how does when you were a comic, or anytime you're on stage in that type of a setting, how do you change as a deliverer of communication versus when you're on the movie set?
First of all, stand-up comedy is brutal. I mean, unequivocally brutal. And some of your recruits, even though you love being a college recruit, for a lot of people, this engagement is tough. It's very brutal to have to go and do this, even though it's part of your job. And one of the keys you can get good at is when you feel like something isn't going well, that you don't just go on autopilot. That's something to take note of yourself, because that's what comics do. When they're not getting laughs, they just start their material starts coming out faster. So
Hmm.
and this comes from a certain amount of internal confidence, but you'll know you're getting better at recruiting when there are breaks in the conversation or you feel like something has gone sideways. And I have a little wrinkle for you on this one, where you can still actually think and hear when metaphorically you're not getting any laughs. And that just goes to show your preparation and your self-confidence, because that's one of the first things a comic learns is how to actually think on stage, because 3 seconds or 4 seconds of silence on stage to comics, not the audience, but to comics, seems like a minute.
Right.
And it is. You know how they always ask people, how long was the earthquake? And somebody's like, oh, it lasted 2 minutes. And it was like 22 seconds,
Right.
because that's what
Right.
trauma does to us, right? It's like, that seemed like it happened forever. So that's one thing. But let me add this to you. I want everybody to
Yeah.
write this down. This is the first time I've said this in almost an hour. You need to write down, what is my out clause?
What does that mean?
That's your reset button. They use reset obviously when they're doing a rundown in television or when they're doing a rundown in radio. Dan, you know this very well. Charlie
Mhm.
Adams certainly knows this very well. And you
Right.
reset it for the audience. You come back from the commercial, and hey guys, we're back, and they're doing the thing and a blah and a guy, and we have this guy on. Well, when we are speaking or when we're talking with somebody, you have to have a reset button. On a date, sometimes it's excusing yourself to go to the bathroom, or that's what she does. It gives you a chance to go, okay, got to clear the brain. Well, when you're doing a presentation on a short period, you don't get to go to the bathroom. You
Right.
have to do a reset on the spot within probably 3 to 5 seconds in here when something isn't going right. So I call it full stop, reset, and right in there, have an out clause. And what I mean by an out clause is always something you do that changes the subject or disarms the moment. And you have to know what that is for you.
Right.
It's not necessarily something that changes from recruit to recruit. It's just your thing. I have two of them. I you know I,
Yeah.
when
Tell
I'm
me about
doing.
yours. That's what I was going to
Oh,
ask, is what are your out
well,
clauses?
mine make no sense, because the out clause is not supposed to be linear. It's not about it making sense. It's about distracting your audience's mind just for a moment while the magician pulls the card out of the back and starts down the road again. So
Right.
mine is like, sometimes something will be going this way. I'll go, the blah blah and the thing and a whoop de doo. And I just say that because nobody has any idea what the hell I was talking about. That's
Right.
one of mine. And another mine is because I'm always making side jokes as I'm saying something serious. When someone looks at me with a blank stare like you might be right now, I always go, well, that should have been funnier. But anyway, and in the that should have been funnier, but anyway, my mind is resetting the direction that I want to now go and change
Hmm.
the subject and get off of that. It's just dodging a pothole real quick. Like,
Right.
oh, we hit a pothole. Oh, there's look like four more of them. It happens really fast, but we all know how to do this. I promise, Dan, we do from the
Right.
time we're kids. The difference is, as a recruiter, just like everything else I'm talking about, you can master this. You can learn if you sit down and go, yeah, what kind of, don't do what someone else has done. This has to come organically, inception. This has to come out of you. What's a wrinkle, a thing? It has to be verbal. Can't be physical, you'll scare someone. It
Right.
has to be verbal. What is the way you can disarm, change a subject? And a lot of people sometimes point to something in the house or point to something in their office, but that commonly is too much, because what it does when you're on a limited amount of time is it takes you down the story of that widget that's on the back shelf behind you back there,
Mm.
that trophy, that frame, something in their house, and and then you lose time. You lose valuable time, because then you send a parent or an athlete down the road of telling a story that takes too much of your time. This has to come out of you. It's controlled by you. You put it out, you grab it, you put it away, and you go back down the road. And I call it an out clause just because I've had to read so many contracts in my life. But that little
Yeah.
tool, that little wrinkle, when you learn what yours is, and by the way, comics have it. That's why you brought that up and it came out of me. You pulled that out of me because that's what comics have. Comics
Right.
have things either to hecklers or to, we have out clauses to either get us
Right.
back on our material or go off on somebody or go down a quick route and then come pull yourself back. So it's
Right.
just a metaphorical phrase I use because we all have moments, even when things go well, sometimes you have a little wrinkle, a little moment. And so you got to find what your out clause is. Could be I make
Right.
jokes about something I'm wearing, or I'll say something about my hair. It's just to distract your audience briefly while your brain gets yourself back on track of where you want to go.
Right. And just to not, I don't want to beat the whole stand-up comic thing
That's okay.
anymore, but I do. I think it's fascinating. That whole world. Why do we like going to see a stand-up comic? Because we know the pressure is on them. We are there. We've paid money, and they better make us laugh. And we're going there. We actually want to laugh. I mean, if I've been to a bunch of Seinfeld performances, and Jim Gaffigan and whatever comedian I've been on stand-up, smaller stand-up stages, and watch those comics, and we're going there to laugh, and your
Sure.
audience as a coach is coming there to your campus, or they've invited you to their house because they really want to like you. I think they want to see. And so what I'm hearing you say is these, like the out clause, a little reset button. Your audience is patient with you. They want you to do well. They're not looking to boo you out of their house and ruin their chances of getting recruited by you, which I think sometimes is lost on coaches. If so, my last question is this, and as a comic, maybe you can relate it back to an experience or many experiences. Um, when you're on stage and things aren't going well and you feel like, I've used my third out clause and it's still not going well, what's the strategy? Because I think a lot of coaches are in that situation where, boy, I don't feel like I'm connecting. They've been here on campus for 4 hours. What would your advice be on that side?
Well, my advice would always be at that moment, would be again asking somebody a question.
Mm,
And one of the questions that I would probably tend to, I mean, I would probably want to ask this anyway, but I would really use this as a recruiter as an out question if I possibly could, is do you have any concerns about being homesick? Now,
mm,
we believe that somebody has to be homesick, like you said, because you're trying to recruit somebody from Connecticut to go to Alabama, or you're trying to recruit somebody from North Carolina to go to, Cal.
right.
But that's not true. That's why I used the Lubbock Austin statement earlier. Austin and Lubbock are not the same two cities. And I know you know that, Dan.
Hmm.
So somebody who grew up in Lubbock who's going to go to Austin, it's not that it's a fish out of water, but it's different. So
Hmm.
I would tend to, because when you ask somebody what makes you homesick, that's the reason that's would always be a question of mine, is because the parents, or even siblings are going to be homesick for you when you're gone. So that's a
Right.
question that touches everybody in not the same way, but gets you into what I call a similar pool of a feeling at a given moment. And it can literally stop a train in the environment
Mm,
and the audience and the intent of recruiting someone.
right.
And
So
you never know what that answer is going to be, but that's one of the things that I do to try and take something that's just not going well, bringing it right back home to being
right.
gone.
So something personal and something about them, not the coach, and not what they're
Yeah,
trying to present. But
absolutely. What are you going
turning
to
it
miss?
back and
What are you going to
right.
miss the most if you can't be home? They're going to be here. What are you going to miss the most? Something that you got to get them to talk. If you
Right.
think it's going wrong with stuff coming out of your mouth, the comic, and you can't do this on stand up, but you can do this as a recruiter. You got to then turn it over to them. You got to let
Right.
them be the voice in the room that fills that sincerity and fills that gap that just happened because the train has gone off and you can't seem to get it back on.
Right. So, and then we can move to the third aspect of the communication sort of threesome that you've outlined, which is intent. And so you have your audience, you understand that, you understand what your environment is. How does intent plug into all that? What does that mean from a coach or an actor's point of view to know and to be able to communicate intent? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, the intent for an actor, and the reason why it comes up, we all have an intent. Just like my intent before I clicked on connect to the Zoom today is I want to be as tremendous for you and your audience as I can possibly be. That's my intent. That's similar to the goal of I want to sign them. But I can't function throughout this interview with that intent being the thing that's right in front of my face, because then you'll be disconnected to what makes your intent successful, which is your sincere desire to communicate. And
Right.
so your intent may be to sign somebody, but what your intent really has to be is, let me see if I can get to know this kid a little bit better than I think I could.
Hmm.
Have your
Okay.
intent. Let me see if I can have this parent really know that they understand I care about what the kid's about more than just sports, getting good grades, and that he doesn't die on my watch. I mean, I'm not even making a joke out of that. Those are three
Right.
important things, and that's something parents are concerned with. But
Right.
you would like to see a parent really get a sense that you give a little bit more about on a Venn diagram some of those little slices of their kid that maybe they didn't even realize mattered as much to the kid who wound up talking about something. Your intent
Mm.
always has to come from, there's a chapter in my book called Sincerity of Purpose. Your intent has to be driven by sincerity of purpose. And whether you sign that kid or not, whether they choose to come with you or not, I simply look at as a potential of intent, just like I do an audition is, someone said this once, I didn't invent it, said you'll never get the chance to play this character again if you don't get the job. So enjoy it the
Mm.
first time, known as the job interview we call an audition. You're never going to get a chance again to meet this human being or sit with this kid in the way you are. See how much you can enjoy getting to know a little bit more about them. That's an intent that might change your pitch. You're still pitching, but it
Right.
will change the tone and the intonation of that intent as to how it comes at them. That's what I would say about intent.
So you said you talked about intent. We could all the coach would have the intent of signing this student athlete
Mhm.
in the recruiting process, and that is the big picture. What I heard you talk about, though, because the coach is going to obviously have all these little conversations, all these interactions over maybe an 18, 24-month period with a recruit and
Mhm.
his or her family, that the intent really is in the same way that you sat down before you clicked on, go to the Zoom meeting and we were talking now, you sort of came up with what the intent was. Uh, the coach should probably, before each conversation, define what is the intent of this call, what am I trying to do, what is the purpose of this that I'm trying to convey, and really keep that in mind without that being something that blinds them, as you put it, but it has to be the driver. And I would expect also then that the intent in the first phone call is going to be way different than the intent in the phone call and the conversation you're having for the 40th time 18 months later with them.
Absolutely. But the goal is still to have somebody be comfortable with being around you.
Hmm.
Something it didn't take me that long to learn it, Dan, but it's something I learned as a young man with regards to women is that they wanted to go out with somebody again that they were comfortable with. Yes, all of those other factors we have with regards to any form of physical human attraction has similarities to it, but they want to know when you're showing up that their shoulders are already relaxed
Hmm.
before you get to the door. And from the first phone call to when you show up at their house, there needs to be a natural form of I'm looking forward to seeing to this person come to their house, both the athlete and or any form of adult observer, superior
Right.
person or parent or whatever. And that comes from having a sincere interest and a little bit about who they are to
Right.
make them comfortable.
So in making them comfortable, and obviously you just touched on some things that get into this whole idea of nonverbal communication, the body language, that they, that comfort that there's something about the personality they're in front of and the shoulders do relax and they do feel comfortable. Are there things that you've been taught as an actor that people would need to sort of understand and grasp when it comes to the things that you should be doing to do exactly what you're talking about, Kevin, which is to make somebody else comfortable, the person that you're talking to? Are there nonverbal things to either focus on or avoid in that interaction that convey things that
Right.
maybe verbal communication just can't?
I would say two things, and they're
Okay.
both physical. They're physical and they're nonverbal. But one of the first things that I would notice now, as an actor walking into an audition, it's a little bit different. For example, playing somebody who's a military person, which I've done oddly several times.
Mhm.
They have a way of walking. They have a way of being. I've got two friends in LAPD. My uncle was a sheriff. And my sister was in the Navy. So I've booked a couple of military jobs simply because I know how they enter a room. Now
Hmm.
that's individual to myself. I've had more than one person go, "Were you in the military?" I'm like, "No, I just know how
Wow.
they enter a room."
Right.
I would tell you the coaches and recruiters to the second from the second you see parents or the athlete, notice how they engage. Do they walk close together? Are they arm in arm? Is there a physical closeness amongst them? And then also notice how they engage you. Now, I know we're in the time of COVID and all that, but I'm going to set that
Right.
aside because we're
Sure.
going to eventually have a vaccine. We're going to get past that. So it's like, who reaches out to you first? If there's both parents, is the mom or is the dad? Does the mom go to shake your hand, or does she shake your hand and kind of give you a hug? Does the dad shake your hand? Does he seem comfortable? Does he looking? You have to notice, what your audience is physically doing in a nonverbal way. And when you go to turn to walk with them, where do they put you?
Hmm.
Does even if it's just the parent and the recruit, do they naturally drift and leave you in the middle? Do they naturally does the recruit go on the other side of their parent away from you? This is the same thing of right walking down the street, right, with your girlfriend or your wife, or your partner, and never having them be on the outside next to the traffic. It's one of the most normal gentlemen. I don't even think about it, and I do it.
Right. Right.
So those are some of the most important because you have a brief period of time. So those
Right.
are some of the most important nonverbal things, along with, yes, I still would be the guy, Southern, that would have someone come into my office, and I would naturally have two chairs if I knew two parents were coming. And I would naturally sort of make a little gesture, like a tip of the cap in golf, of the chair for the mother to sit down. Like that's
Right.
just how I was raised.
Right.
So there's a lot of nonverbal things that add to that comfortability that this person gives a crap. Yeah.
Right. So I'll flip it around now. Just and this will be the last question on this particular little micro topic we dove into, which is when you're as an actor, you walk into a room. What are the two things you don't want to do from a body language standpoint? That's either going to tell the casting director, the people you're reading with, that you aren't confident, that you are nervous, even if you are nervous. Like, how do you fake it, and what shouldn't you be doing? What are the two things? There are two
Oh,
or three things that you would say, this would not be good for an actor to do, and thereby not good for a coach to do.
well, it's a good question. I'm going to bring it right back to sports because I've been told many times, especially when I played third base, that I looked a little bit like George Brett. Now, technically, sitting
Okay.
here right now, I don't. But George Brett,
I can see that. No, I can see that.
George Brett, Hall of Famer, said he was so nervous before every game he almost threw up. So nerves are a part of life, especially when you're quote unquote on the spot. So it's not so much nerves, it's what you do with them. And as an actor, the one thing that I've spent a lot of years talking to actors about is we have to walk into a room and there actually is a place for you to go sit or stand that you're supposed to go to. And what we tend to do is we tend to do two things that come from nervous energy. One is we go too fast to the spot, and two is we start talking and we shouldn't, because the
Mm,
only thing that derails is us. I mean, if I'm having to come in and scream and cry, we're not chit chatting about what happened on the news yesterday.
right.
So I always told people, and again, I'm somebody who's very impatient. I played third base, not shortstop. It's two extra bounces, and I don't have the time. So these are I say that because these are learned habits for me. This was not my
Yeah.
norm.
Yeah.
My norm would just grab it and run through the wall. So that would be, I learned how to slow down. When they opened the door for me, I learned how to enter the room slower so that I could, because as you walk, your vision gets brought down to just them and the camera, right?
Right.
So that I could see the whole office and where I'm supposed to sit or stand. Where do they have the mark on the floor? Where am I? This is the same skill set as walking into a home and talking and being connected, but still peripherally seeing what's around you. Same skill set. Also, actors would come in and they'd start talking. Do you have, because natural thing for casting to ask is, do you have any questions? And I used to say to actors, if you don't have a question, don't invent one. And same thing is, all of a sudden you'll walk in, there's some sort of conversation maybe happening in the home before you cross the proscenium of the door, the threshold, and they're talking whatever, and now all of a sudden your brain goes, I'm in the house, I'm on the clock, boom, and you just start running your mouth,
Right.
and you've just derailed the natural form of drift. So there's an impatience that I think we have to learn as recruiters. And I'd love to say that that's just based on age and veteranism, but I think you'd probably agree with me. No, it's not. This is a
Yeah.
skill set. This is something you have to have a map. You have to
Right.
have a grocery list of how you prepare for a recruitment process in person.
Right. So that patience, and I think that's really what it comes down to, is a patience to enter the room, a patience not to just jump in and fill the void of
Mhm.
silence necessarily. Um, what advantage does that give you, or what does it? I think, what does it communicate? So when somebody else is seeing you enter the room slowly, and you are taking your time, what what are you conveying to them? What are they seeing by that?
Confidence.
Okay.
I mean, you have to see, you have to be cognitive, confident, and comfortable. And you have to be, I actually talk about this, called the three C's. You have
Hmm.
to be all three of those without a word said. You just
Got
do.
it.
And
Yeah.
again, you know, the old joke, Dan, is dogs and bees can smell fear. You know, parents, when you're trying to take their kid away from them,
Yeah.
can smell insincerity. They can smell lack of preparedness. They can smell being disingenuine. They can smell um, something where you're just doing your standard. You punched your Staples easy button and you just started down the track of your train. It's like we can all smell. That's the thing about the wedding ring at the bar with the ladies. They can smell desperation.
Right.
And so it's just it's cognitive confidence and comfortability.
Right.
That
So I'm
comes
gonna
from preparedness.
so as we start to wrap this up,
Sorry,
but
I'm
no,
running
no,
long
this
on you.
is no, you're good. Yeah, I think anybody that's watching this is engaged. But I'm gonna throw in another filter, another layer to view this all
Mhm.
through, and that is social media, because so many of these prospects and athletes and their parents are involved in social media, and athletes are busy trying to to convey certain communication cues through their social media, how much they're wanted. I got another offer from another school. They're trying to build up their credibility in front
Mhm.
of coaches. But then I think it's also taught them to view communication differently than it did, certainly back in our day. We have to communicate differently because of how they receive communication. I just didn't know if you had any thoughts on that. The fact that they're reading tweets that are 140 characters long, and they're watching TikTok videos that are 30 seconds long, and now everybody's an entertainer, and everybody is in the performing arts in one way or another, and that it seems like the bar has been set so high for a coach or anybody else that wants to break through and communicate to that individual, especially a teenager, because they're so used to people entertaining them. And I'm just wondering how that might factor into what we've been talking about, with the audience, the environment, the intent, that you're trying to break through this social media filter that now most athletes have.
Well, I that kind of yes, and it varies a little bit in acting, so I'm not going to go down that
Hmm.
rabbit hole. But the truth of the matter is, social media to me is the personality, and your work ethic at practice is your character. And
Sure.
so and that would be the line that I would draw when talking to a recruit is, listen, I love I would actually use those words. I love your personality on all your social media. That was some funny stuff. Like I'd pick one that I really dug that it was like I can connect with him again. Be cool and hip without being hokey. And one of
Right.
the easy ways to do that is point to something they've done, not what you are trying to emulate.
Mm.
But then I would probably wind up spending more time on character, and I probably would look at them and go, this is a tough sport. It doesn't matter what the sport is. If you're going to go hit 500 golf balls a day and spend an hour in the sand, it may not be hitting a heavy bag or deadlifting 650, and it may not be hitting tackling dummies for an hour or two a days. But I would hit them with the work ethic character statement as much as I could in a
Hmm.
really simple way to go, if this keeps you going and flowing and et cetera, just remember the world is watching. But at the end of the day, we're successful here because of our character and our work ethic. And that's
Right.
what I would draw to it, because social media is just a form of your personality expression.
Right. So we have a coach that's listened to this, the full hour, and he's saying or she's saying, I love this, and I need to make these changes. And those three categories of communication made perfect sense. And now I want to do something to get started. And obviously, they can talk to you and engage with you in a
Mhm.
lot of different ways, because you do training, you do you. That's part of what you offer, and we'll put all that information on how to get in touch with you at the end. But in watching this, what is the first one or two things that you would say, Coach, if you're new to this, but you like the concepts, here's your starting point. Do steps one and two. What would those be?
Steps one and two are real simple, Dan. That they both cover the word familiarity.
Okay.
Familiarity is one of the greatest tools and one of the most dangerous things in our lives. So the two things you need to do under familiarity is you have to start. Remember how we would always tell you if you're going to go on a diet, write down everything that you ate, right? Okay. So the two things you want to start on this program is you want to actually start with paying attention to how you start noticing how your demeanor changes, talking to the same person. I see Dan Tudor 10 times a day for whatever reason.
Right.
How do I naturally change speaking to Dan when I'm in his office versus when I see him walking outside versus when I see him inside of a building somewhere, but not his office? You have to start taking note of right off the bat how audience and environment changes you with people that you're already unconsciously familiar with and have a
Mm,
pattern of. Because once we get used to something, we're not aware of how much it shifts. We know that we talk differently in a library or an elevator, but we're not cognitive of it when it happens. And
right.
especially we're not cognitive of it when it's somebody that we're comfortable with. So you need to start taking notes. We all have our a voice memo thing on our phone, right? Well,
Right.
back in the day, I had one of those little recorders when I was a stand-up with the little baby tape, I'd get in the
Yep.
car and I'd
Yep.
say something. Right. We all have that. So just like writing down what you're going to eat, when you're trying to, alter your or Noom or whatever app you're using, start taking notes on how you notice. This is literally cellular, Dan, how your demeanor and your entire body changes, your mind changes, your tone of voice changes when in different environments with the same person that you're familiar with. Those would be my one and two.
Awesome. Well, Kevin E. West, we really appreciate you being a part of this, and I would love to talk to you more and have you talk with coaches more as we get deeper into this. Because again, I mean, communication is such a huge part of what college
Mm,
coaches are asked to be experts at, and yet none of them have had any training. And so this entire talk has been fascinating, and hopefully it's just the first step. But I appreciate you being a part of the National Collegiate Recruiting Conference and what we're trying to give coaches. We'll put all the information, Coach, on how to interact with Kevin, contact him, and possibly use him to help you get better at this core part of what you do. But Kevin, again, thanks for being a part of it, and Coach, thanks for watching. And now it's time to go out and put these 3 steps to work. Knowing your audience, your environment, and having that intent, as Kevin just outlined, is going to be big for recruiting for you potentially in 2020 and 2021. So thanks for watching. We'll be back with more videos here on the conference channel, and we'll see you later.
thanks, Dan.